Hello, how are you? My name is Orla McGovern and I live in Galway, in the west of Ireland. And actually, if you look out our window at the moment, the sun is shining for a change. And if the sun is shining, or even if it's raining, what we love to tell our visitors in Galway to do is to go for a walk on the prom or the Salt Hill Promenade. And it's a beautiful thing. You'd start in town and you walk all the way along by the sea. And when you get halfway down, you kick the wall. And it's not because you're annoyed at the wall or anything, it's just because that's the tradition of your halfway mark. And then you walk back again towards the town. And it's a great place for watching people or looking around at all the local talent or just seeing who's out and having a chat with a friend. And there's something else very particular about a walk in the prom, and that's the sound of the seagulls over your head. They're squawking, and the Galway seagulls are particularly adventurous and a little bit cheeky, and they'll swoop down and steal a bit of your chocolate or your chips, or they've actually been known to steal an entire sandwich. But sometimes when they're squawking over your head, it sounds like they're actually trying to tell you something. And you know what? That's because they are. It was about 100 years ago, and there was two sisters lived in Galway, Anya and Maura Casey. Now, for any of you out there who have a sister, you might know this to be familiar. Some days they squabbled something fierce, but other days they got on like a house on fire and they were the best of friends. And one of their favourite things to do in Galway was to go for a picnic on a Sunday on the prom and watch people. A bit of people watching is always good for you. So they packed up their bag, their little basket with a checkered blanket, and they had sandwiches wrapped in paper, and they had a bottle of sweet tea way before the flasks. And they had something else that day. They had a piece of their Auntie Nora's fruitcake. Now, Auntie Nora was known to have the best fruitcake in the whole of the west of Ireland. It'd be like getting 10 Easter eggs today. So they're really looking forward to this. So off they went down to the prom to have their picnic. They set out their blanket and there's a bit of salt in the air. So the hunger came on them very fast. And they were wolfing down their sandwiches and they were looking out at the sea. And it was a lovely, bright, cold, bright day like today. But the waves were quite choppy, as they can get. And they saw all the people walking by, walking their dog. There's a woman walking her cat. Ooh, couple holding hands. And the next thing, who should come down the prom walking towards them? Only Sean Walsh. Now I have to tell you, Sean Walsh and Maura, one of the sisters, had a little bit of a something going on with them. They were always flirting with each other. And the way they would like to flirt with each other was by making each other laugh. Like I'll tell you, Sean would be at Mass of a Sunday and he'd turn around to Maura and he'd grab his nose and he'd make a little pig face like this at her. And she would crack up laughing. Of course, the priest wasn't too happy. Or Maura might be at the market on a Saturday and she'd see Sean coming and she'd puff up her face like a puffer fish. And of course, he'd crack up laughing. So he was coming down the prom and she looked around for something to make him laugh. And she looked down at the big piece of Auntie Nora's cake. And really, without thinking, she picked up the cake and she shoved the whole thing in her mouth in one go. And next thing, she opened her mouth just as Sean passed. Bits of cake were spilling out and raisins and dark flour and oh, it looked like a bit like a slurry pit for those of you who know who that was. And of course, Sean cracked up laughing. He was bent over in half. But I'll tell you who wasn't laughing. Yeah, that's right. Anya, the sister. That cake was for her as well. And that idiot of a sister of hers was after shoving the whole thing into her gob just to impress Sean Walsh. Well, without thinking, And Anya had a temper. Didn't she stand up and slap Maura across the face? Oh, it was a bit like a Quentin Tarantino film. Everything went into slow motion and bits of cake came flying out of Maura's mouth. And oh, her face started to shake like when Rocky got a punch. Sean took off like a light. There's no way he was staying around for the rest of this. And as he ran down the prom, dark clouds began to gather over in the sky. Well, I'll tell you one thing. If Anya had a bad temper, you can guess who had a worse one. Maura. She could feel the sting of that slap on her face still, and she could feel this red tide of anger rising up through her body, filling her pores and taking over everything in her arms. And next thing, without thinking, didn't she shove her sister into the sea? Well, of course, immediately she regretted it, and she wasn't a strong swimmer, so she looked around for help, and it was now raining on the prom, and there was thunder in the air, and Sean was long gone, and there wasn't a single soul to be seen. Everyone had gone for cover. Oh, please, she said, please, will somebody help me save my sister? I can't swim very well. Please, I didn't mean to do it. But Anya was starting to sink beneath the waves, as you do in the choppy waters. Oh, please, said Maura, please. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll do anything. But the more she was pleading, the more it was in vain, and there was nobody around. And she kept crying out with her voice, please, she said, I'll do anything. Oh, I'll never look at Sean Walsh again. I'll never flirt with him. I'll never flirt with any man. I won't marry. For my penance, I'll walk up and down the Salt Hill Promenade until the end of my days. Just please, somebody, save my sister. Well, the stronger she spoke, the more her words became like a prayer or a spell. And somehow, somebody or something heard her. And out in the waves, as her sister sank down beneath the water for the third time, something strange began to happen. Out of her fingers, feathers began to sprout. Out of her arms, feathers began to sprout. Out of her back, feathers began to sprout. And her nose and her mouth grew into one, and they grew long and yellow and hard and became a beak. And her legs grew narrow, and her toes began to web. And out of the water, she flew as a seagull. Maura was so delighted. Oh, thank you, she said, thank you. My sister is saved. My sister is alive. Well, I tell you who wasn't happy about it. Yeah, Anya. A seagull! A seagull! I don't want to be a seagull. I don't want to be a seagull. This is all because you were flirting with your man. And well, she wasn't so much saying it as squawking it. And she came over and she began to peck on her sister's head. Well, I have to tell you this. Maura Casey kept her promise. And from that day forth, she never looked at Sean Walsh again. And she never married. And she did spend penance walking up the Salt Hill Promenade till the end of her days. And sometimes you'd see her there on a Sunday with a seagull circling around her head. And occasionally she'd reach into her pocket and she'd pull out a bit of a sandwich, and it would swoop down and eat out of her hand. And she grew older and older and older until the day came when she passed, and she was laid out on her coffin, and they say on top of it was a bird pecking, 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 a seagull. Well, Maura's long gone, but the promenade is still there. And if you go down there for a walk and you look up and you listen very carefully, you can hear Anya Casey still circling above you, still wanting desperately to tell you about the one thing that brought about her downfall with her sister. Cake! 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 And that's my story. And thank you so much for listening.